Scotland has more than got what it takes to be an independent country. If we were independent tomorrow, we would be the 14th richest country in the world. Now, how do we calculate that? Well, the way you calculate the wealth of a country is to take all of the value that the economy produces, divide it by the number of people who live in that country, and that gets you the gross domestic product per head of population. By that measurement, Scotland is the 14th richest country in the world. By that measurement, we are richer than countries like France, Japan, the United Kingdom itself. It's number 18 in the world, which is not a bad position to be in, but an independent Scotland would be 4 places above that. And interestingly, when you look at the countries that sit above us in that league table of the world's richest countries, you know what? They tend to be small countries, very similar in many different ways to Scotland. So the top 10 wealthiest countries in the world are the Norways of this world, the Denmarks, the Swedens. So we are one of the richest countries in the world. And often when I say that to people, I get met with what I've come to describe as the "ah, but" response. And the "ah, but" response usually goes, "ah, but that's all about oil. Once the oil is gone, Scotland won't be one of the richest countries in the world anymore." Well, again, that's not true. Oil is a fantastic resource that we're very lucky to have. Most independent countries in the world, including the independent countries that are very prosperous and do very well, most of them don't have oil and gas. So we're fortunate. We've got these massive natural resources, but they're not the basis of our economy. They're a big bonus in our economy. We're lucky to have strength and depth in our economy so that we've got a thriving, world-leading life sciences sector. We've got a food and drink industry that exports billions of pounds every year. We've got a strong, although it could be stronger, manufacturing industry. There's a company in Falkirk manufactures buses that you will find in countries all over the world. The tourism industry, again, generates billions of pounds for our economy. And we've got renewable energy as well. We didn't just win the natural lottery once as a country by discovering oil and gas. We won it twice because we've got vast potential in renewable energy, and it never ever runs out. So it's not all about oil. I mentioned Norway a second ago, a country that discovered oil round about the same time as Scotland, a country that is in the top 10 richest countries in the world, a country that, unlike Scotland as part of the UK, has actually saved some of its oil revenues to build up a massive oil fund that means future generations of Norwegians will always benefit from oil, even after the oil has run out. But in Norway, oil and gas revenues make up something like 30% of all of the tax generated in Norway. In Scotland, the equivalent figure is only 15%. So we're less dependent, if you want to use that word, on oil than Norway is. And have you ever heard anybody say Norway's not capable of being an independent country? Obviously not, because it is one of the world's most successful independent countries. The last point I want to make on this issue is to tell you that we're not subsidised as a country. You often hear those on the other side of this debate saying Scotland can't be independent because we wouldn't be able to afford to pay for things like our health service and our pensions and all of the other services that we depend on. Well, that also is not true. How do I know it's not true? Because we pay for all these things right now. I want to break the dreadful news to you this evening that there is no money tree sits in London growing free money for Scotland and sending it up here to pay for things. All of the services we depend on are funded by us, from our taxes, our national insurance contributions. What happens now is that we pay these taxes, they go to the Treasury in London, and London decides how much of it we get back. If we are independent, we pay our taxes, they stay in Scotland, and we decide the priorities for how that money is spent. I hope in a way that makes Scotland a better place to live, not just for us, but for generations to come. So that's the first question I wanted to answer for you tonight. We can do this, and do not ever let anybody tell you differently. However you decide to vote on the 18th of September, and obviously I hope that you decide to vote yes, but everybody will come to their own decision for their own reasons, and that is absolutely fine. But if you do decide to vote no, please, and this is a plea from my heart, don't let it be because somebody, somewhere, has convinced you that Scotland can't afford to be independent. Because trust me, nothing, absolutely nothing, could be further from the truth. Somebody once said to me, and I hear it quite often now, that if it was true that Scotland was subsidised, and we couldn't afford to stand on our own 2 feet, and we depended on Westminster to prop us up, then don't you think they'd have got rid of us a long, long time ago? They probably have privatised us by now. They're doing it to most other things. So we can afford to be an independent country. Second question, though, is, in my view, the more important one. Why should we do this? You know, just because you can do something in life doesn't always mean you should do it. The reason Scotland should be independent at its heart is quite a simple reason. It's because nobody will ever do a better job of running Scotland than people who live in Scotland. People who work here, people who run businesses here, who raise families here. We've all got the biggest stake in making our country a success. That doesn't mean we'll always get these decisions right. Independence isn't a magic wand. We don't wake up the morning after to find that the streets are paved with gold and the taps run oil and whiskey as well as water. It's not a magic wand, and anybody who tells you it is deserves to be treated with the same disdain as the person who tells you we're too poor to be independent. But it is a massive opportunity to put into our hands our own resources and the decision-making powers that we need to determine how those resources are used to build a better country for all of us. And I believe we will always make better decisions about our own country than politicians 600 miles away in Westminster, politicians that very often we haven't even voted for, will ever make for Scotland. Let me just give you a couple of examples that illustrate the choice that we are being asked to make, the kind of choices that we can make if we are independent as opposed to decisions being made in London. Right now, under the Westminster governments, people in Scotland, many people in Scotland, are being pushed deeper and deeper into poverty. And I'm not just talking about people who don't work. I'm talking about people who do work, who work hard, who struggle to make ends meet, but because of changes to tax credits, to benefits, to failures on the part of Westminster governments to make sure the minimum wage rises to keep pace with the cost of living, because of all of these decisions, more and more people are living in poverty. Your children's charities in this country predict that by the year 2020 there'll be 100,000 more children in Scotland living in poverty than is the case right now. I visited a food bank in Glasgow this morning to announce some Scottish Government funding to help food banks do the job that they do. You know, there's been a 400% increase in the number of people going to food banks in Scotland over the past year. That is a scandal in one of the richest countries in the world. And what makes it worse is that this is happening at the same time as Westminster parties are planning to spend billions, tens of billions of pounds of our money on new nuclear weapons on the River Clyde. Now, that's a choice. Money's not infinite. Money is always finite, but we've got a choice about how we spend our resources if we're independent that we don't have right now. And I would far rather see our wealth as a country spent to deliver better childcare, to deliver better health services, to lift children out of poverty, than see it spent on nuclear weapons or putting more people into the House of Lords to do nothing for us anyway. If we're independent, we get the chance to decide what kind of economic policy we have here, so that we can encourage more companies to come to Scotland, to establish themselves in Scotland, to expand in Scotland, to create more opportunities for our young people. Right now, every single year, something like 40,000 of our young people leave this country. Now, some of them leave because they want to see the world and spread their wings. And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But many of these young people leave Scotland because they can't find the opportunities here in order to stay. We need to get the economic powers to enable us to do something about that. So these are just some of the choices that open up to us if we are independent, rather than having Westminster run our country. And what happens if we don't vote yes? Well, if we don't vote yes in September, then 8 months later, there's another general election in the UK. And we've got absolutely no guarantee in that election that we'll get the government we vote for. There is every chance that next May, if we haven't voted to be independent, then what we get is another 5 years of David Cameron and George Osborne running our country. Now, that would be fine if we voted for David Cameron and George Osborne, but we don't. You know, throughout my entire life, Labour has won every single general election in Scotland, without exception. And yet for more than half my life we've had a Tory Prime Minister. That's not acceptable. Now it sounds like an anti-Tory point, and hands up, I'm pretty anti-Tory, but it's not really an anti-Tory point, it's a pro-democracy point. We should get the governments that win the elections in Scotland, not those that lose the elections. So if we don't want to take the risk of another Tory government doing more damage to our country, then we need to take the ability to decide for ourselves who governs us into our own hands. So that's the case for Scotland being independent, for being the same as countries the world over. My final point here, I suppose, is a personal one to each and every person in this room, because often when I speak at meetings like this, I get, in various different ways, pleas for certainty and for guarantees. And my job tonight is to give you as much facts and as much information and as much certainty on things as I possibly can. But the world is uncertain. Every single decision you ever take in your life, whether it's getting married or changing job or moving house, you've always got a wee part of your brain thinking, am I doing the right thing? But you do these things because deep down inside you know they are right. And you know that if you don't, you might regret it for the rest of your life. This is our big opportunity in Scotland, to take control of our own future into our own hands. Nobody will ever run this country better than those of us who live here will. We might never get this opportunity again. So I really hope everybody grasps it with both hands. We won't look back. Yeah, we'll have our ups and downs. All countries do. We'll go through tough periods, we'll have challenges, but we will never look back, because we'll be the ones in charge of what kind of country this is. And I believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that it will be a better country for us and for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Nicola, and that's given us a good start to the meeting, which I'm now going to put over to you to get the first three questions. If we can ask your questions, get your question in, but as briefly as you can, we'll get more people the opportunity to ask questions. We've got just about an hour for this, so we want to hear from as many of you as possible. So can I have the first hands up for the first questions, please? Down here in the front row, lady here. And then lady there, and I'll better take a man, and the guy at the back. Okay.
Hi, my name's Davina. I'm wondering if we get independence and we get rid of Trident, what's going to be in place of that, even though I'm all for getting rid of Trident, but I'm wondering what's going to be put in place in that.
Okay, thank you. Question?
Hi, my name's Eleanor. My question is, I've got a family member who accesses health service south of the border because there isn't a service here in Scotland. And my question is, in an independent Scotland, would we still be able to access that service? And if not, would one be set up here?
Okay, thank you. Is it the gentleman standing at the back?
You mentioned earlier 40,000 Scottish children leave here every year. Well, I was one of those kids. And I left here in 1980, thrown in a scrap heap by Thatcher. And I've been traversed the globe since then. And I've just sold up my holdings abroad, and I've come home to this country to be part of this process. Do people like me, and there's many out there all over the world that I've spoken to, do we get to vote? Can I vote? Being away from this country for all those years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's been a very good question. I want to get rid of Trident. I've been against nuclear weapons all my life. I don't think there's a moral case for nuclear weapons. I don't think there's a practical case. And I don't think there's a financial case either. They waste a vast amount of money on weapons that we all hope and pray will never ever be used, because it would be catastrophic for the human race if they were ever used. But you ask a good question: what do we have to defend ourselves if not Trident? First point to make is we want to get rid of Trident. We don't want to close the base that Trident is currently at. Faz Lane in an independent Scotland would become a conventional naval base, and it would be the headquarters for the three forces of an independent Scotland. In that configuration, Faz Lane would support, broadly speaking, the same number of jobs as it does just now. They wouldn't be the same jobs, obviously, because it would be a very different set of skills that were required, but the employment level would be broadly the same. What Scotland needs, and what we don't have in every respect just now, are strong conventional forces that are appropriate for the defence needs of our country. We are a maritime nation. We've got a big coastline, we've got a big fishing industry, we've got oil installations. That's the principal purpose of defence, or would be the principal purpose of defence forces in independent Scotland. So we'd have a navy, we'd have an army, we'd have an air force. The government white paper, which you can read if you get the time, sets out in some detail what the size of those forces would be. So we build up to a position of 15,000 full-time military personnel, 5,000 reservists. They would be operational from the bases that currently exist in Scotland that we would inherit at the point of independence, and it goes into some detail about the equipment that they would require to be equipped with. That's what we need, strong conventional forces. We've seen in the last few years some quite brutal cuts to our armed forces. So soldiers given the P45 while they're on the front line in Afghanistan, an absolute scandal in my view. There should be a policy of no compulsory redundancy for soldiers while they're serving in armed combat. We've seen bases here closing. In terms of our naval resource, we actually don't have a lot of the capability that a country of Scotland's size and geography should have. So strong conventional forces, far better use of money than Trident, which doesn't... I don't know. I said I've been against Trident for all of my adult life, and I have, but see, during the Cold War, you at least knew who Trident was pointed at. I couldn't tell you right now who Trident is meant to defend us against, so there's no practical case for Trident, and there's certainly no fiscal case either. Eleanor, this is an issue that's very close to my heart, and I happen to know a wee bit about it because I was Health Secretary for 5 years. The answer to your question is people who go from Scotland to access specialist services south of the border, and there are a number of very specialist services that, because of numbers involved, we don't provide in Scotland, so people go south of the border. There are actually some services that we provide in Scotland and people come from elsewhere in the UK. Those would continue, and the reason they would continue is because they're done right now on a contractual basis. So the health service in Scotland has contracts with the services in England, and we pay for those services just now. We don't get them for nothing. And increasingly, you see those kind of arrangements operating across different boundaries. So people will go to Ireland or vice versa. Remember when swine flu hit Scotland? I was health secretary at that time, and there was a type of treatment that people affected by swine flu needed. A treatment called ECMO to help them breathe. We didn't do that in Scotland. I authorised, or the health service in Scotland authorised the patient to go to Sweden for that treatment at the time. So countries cooperate like that, but we do it on a contractual basis where we fully pay for any services we get. I don't know if you saw a couple of months ago now, the No campaign made quite a scurrilous attempt to scaremonger around some of these issues, and they said that children who required services at Great Ormond Street Hospital would no longer be able to get those services. Great Ormond Street Hospital put out a statement correcting them and saying they were wrong about that. So let's have a debate, let's be passionate, but let's not use sick people, and in particular sick children, to make points like that. You don't have to worry, you can be absolutely assured that those services are secure. Sir, it's nice to have you back. I can see I can hear a tinge of an accent that tells us you've been travelling outside of Scotland for a while. You can vote if, I don't know your circumstances, but if you live here, if you're entitled to be on the register here, you can vote. If there's any dubiety about that, my advice to you would be to see the electoral registration officer locally to see whether you've lived here. If you've got a permanent address here now, you're entitled to vote. The franchise for the referendum is based on residence. It's the same franchise, eligibility to vote, as for the Scottish Parliament elections, with the exception of 16 and 17-year-olds who are getting to vote for the first time. We actually thought about whether it would be feasible to extend the vote to people who were born in Scotland but who didn't live in Scotland anymore. Because I understand if you're Scottish, if you feel Scottish and you're maybe living elsewhere just for work reasons, you're probably a bit peed off that you're not getting a vote. But the problem with doing that is it became impossible to know where you would draw the line. So would you have to have been living in Scotland within the last 5 years, or the last 10 years, or the last 50 years? So it became very difficult to kind of have a rational basis for extending the franchise out of Scotland. But if you're living here now, you should have the right to vote, and I hope if you do have the right to vote, you'll vote yes.
The next three questions, please. The gentleman there with his hand up, the blue shirt, the lady down here, and the gentleman over at that side.
Evening, my name's Joel. Just got a question for you. Mr. Salmon seems to think there will be a currency union. What concerns me about that, if there was to be a currency union, would that not give the Bank of England control over our economic policy? Would they set our interest rates? And Mr. Salmon seems to think there will be a union, but various politicians across the spectrum down south are saying, no, we can't keep it out. So how can you guarantee this?
My name is Madeline. What I want to ask is, I've been working since I was 15. I've paid into my pension for 44 years. Unfortunately, because of labour, I need to work I'm 65 years, 5 months, 29 days. I'm used to any... No, that's what they told me when I phoned up. I'm used to any chance you will reduce the pension age and give young people the jobs that all us older ones are doing, and some of us are not fit to do.
Hello, my name is Duncan. My question, again in currency, it's likely, or it's intended, I think, that at some point we will join the European Union. Is it not the case then that we need to adopt the euro? In reality, that's the currency we would have.
Okay, right, let me take the two currency questions together. I'll start with that one, Duncan, because it's a common misconception that if you're in the European Union or if you're joining the European Union, of course we're already members of the European Union, so we're not coming in from outside like new countries are. But that's not the case. No country, absolutely no country, can be forced into the euro against its will. Some of the conditions that you have to meet for joining the euro, because the EU doesn't let just any country join the euro, there's quite strict conditions you have to meet. Some of them are voluntary. So for example, I'll try not to get too technical about this, you have to be a member of the European exchange rate mechanism for 2 years before you're even eligible to join the euro. And the decision about whether to go into the ERM is an entirely voluntary one for any country. So you cannot be forced into the euro if you don't want to be in it. Good example of a country that's in that position, a country that joined the European Union after the obligation to join or consider joining the euro was in place, is Sweden. It's in the European Union, isn't in the euro, has no intentions of getting into the euro, and it's pretty much accepted that there's nothing that can be done to force a country into the euro. So unless Scotland at some future time, which I think is unlikely, certainly my party has ruled it out, unless there was a positive decision to go into the euro, and I personally think there would have to be a referendum before that could be decided, we can't be forced into the euro against our will. Question wider than that on currency. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes here to explain both the reason for our position on a currency union and why I believe if we vote yes there will be a currency union, and then I'll take your point directly about the Bank of England and what its role would be in that kind of arrangement. We a couple of years ago asked a group of economists, very eminent international economists, to look at the different currency options that would be open to an independent Scotland, and there's several of them. So you could have a currency union, use of the pound without a formal currency union, we could have our own currency, you could go into the euro, which I've already said we've ruled out. So all of these options are viable. Economic jargon, an internationally traded currency. Now, in normal language, that means any country in the world can use the pound, and there is nothing that George Osborne or his mates can do about it. When Ireland became independent from Britain, it used the pound for a long period of time before it had its own currency, and then subsequently Ireland went into the euro. When Australia became independent from Britain, it used, guess what, the pound before it had its own currency. So there's nothing, absolutely nothing, that any country, that Westminster can do to stop any country using the pound. It is, after all, our pound as much as it is the pound of any other part of the UK. We propose using it in a formal currency union, and there are very good reasons why that makes sense for Scotland. Chiefly our trading relationship with England. England's our biggest export market. It would make no sense to have to change currency to do trade with England. But there's some very good reasons why what we are proposing makes sense for the rest of the UK. Actually, I'd go further than that and say that for them to turn their back on what we are proposing would be tantamount to them cutting their nose off to spite their face. If after the yes vote, Westminster does say we're not sharing the pound with Scotland, let me just run through some of the consequences of that for the rest of the UK. Businesses in England would have to pay charges to change currency to trade with Scotland that would probably be in the region of £500 million every year. Now, can you see businesses in England being happy with that, to pay charges that are not necessary, that are additional to what they're having to pay just now? Secondly, if we're in a currency union, our exports, Scotland's exports, the things we sell overseas every year, which are valued at about £100 billion a year, oil and gas being the biggest component of that, but many other things as well. In a currency union, the value of our exports count towards the UK's balance of payments. Have you heard that term? There's a difference between what the UK exports and imports. If the UK's balance of payments was to lose the value of our exports, the rest of the UK's trade deficit would go sky high. And why is that important? Because these kind of things depress and undermine the value of your currency. So you'd have a reduction in the value of sterling if the value of our exports were taken outside of the UK's balance of payments. And thirdly and lastly, if the UK's position, Westminster's position, after a democratic yes vote is you're not getting to share in assets that you've helped to build up, i.e. the pound and the Bank of England, then an independent Scotland would have no obligation. We actually have no legal obligation as it is. We think we've got a moral obligation. But if we're not going to get to share assets, we would have no obligation to share the debt of the UK either. So what the UK would effectively be doing would be to let an independent Scotland walk away debt-free. And they would have to shoulder the 120, 130 billion pounds of debt that should be Scotland's share, with an annual interest payment on that debt of about £5 billion a year. I don't think Westminster's going to want to do that. So there's some very hard-headed, common-sense reasons why what you're hearing now is the talk of a campaign trying to scare you into voting no. Afterwards, I bet you'll be queuing up to get us to stay in a currency union with them. And on your question about the Bank of England, yes, if we're in a currency union, the Bank of England continues to be our central bank. It would continue to set interest rates. It would do that as it does now, independently of government. I don't know if you remember back when the last Labour government came to power and Gordon Brown became Chancellor. The first thing he did was pass legislation to make the Bank of England, when it comes to setting interest rates, independent of government. So the Bank of England would continue to have that function for Scotland, but what an independent Scotland would have is the fiscal power, the power over tax and the levers we need to get an economy growing in order to create the jobs and get the economic growth that I spoke about. And last question, Marjorie, your question about pensions. First point to make is, if we become independent, your pension is safe and guaranteed, you've paid into it, it will be paid and honoured by the government of an independent Scotland. But as you rightly say, people are having to work longer and longer to get their pension these days. For women in this country, your pension age has gone up by 6 years in less than a decade. And it's not going to stop there. The plans are to put pension age up to 66, 67, 68. I reckon I'll be working till I'm about 79 at the rate they're going if they continue down that road. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you if we become independent, we can necessarily put pension age down again, but I do think it's right that we consider whether it's appropriate for it to go up at the same pace as it's going up in the UK as a whole. We've got lower life expectancy in Scotland, and that's nothing to be proud of. We should be, and we are doing as much as we can to try to address that. But we're already losing out. People in Scotland pay in the same to their pension, but get less out because of that lower life expectancy. So is it right that pension age goes up at the same rate as it does elsewhere? I don't think it is. And I think it's one of the things with independence we should have the power to decide for ourselves.
Next 3 questions. We've got the lady standing at the very back, the gentleman over there at the end of the row, and the lady in the pink. Yep. Okay.
Hi there, Mel Kelly. I'm glad to hear you saying you're anti-Tory. I think most of the room probably is. I'm glad to hear you say we'll be able to control our own resources, but I've got a question about water. Now, under devolution, Scotland always had control of our own water. That was one of the things that Strathclyde 97% said, but you personally, Nicola, have transferred control of our water back to Westminster. Now, David Cameron's put through a water bill that has established a UK-wide private water market which includes Scotland's water for non-residential customers, which got royal assent on the 14th of May. As part of that deal, there was an organisation set up called Open Water, where Scotland was meant to have a representative. This week in the paper it said, that's now being scrapped and Ofwat's going to control the whole lot. Now, I asked 2 Scottish ministers at a meeting in Ayr about this. They said they would get back to me, they still haven't, but I've got an article getting published this week about it. I've got all the evidence that says you personally put forward the draft LCM on this to establish a UK-wide non-residential private water market. With the words to David Cameron, we are happy to enter into this joint venture with you. That is true.
I've never written to David Cameron in those terms, I can tell you that right now.
We'll take the other 2 questions and then...
I'll answer your question in a second, because I'll answer it in some detail.
Okay, the other question is the guy down here.
Okay. You mentioned a couple of times that Scottish wealth will be based partially on its oil. At the moment, the companies that deliver the oil are privately owned companies. So how do we ensure that that money then comes back into the public domain?
Maybe over here to start questions, maybe second then.
Hi, Miss Mayor. It's just about people that have got children in nurseries now and they get child trans credits and things like that. What happens if we get yes? Does this all stop, or can the kids are still going to be nursery places for all the kids? For the women that are working or husbands?
Okay, right, let me take the water question first of all, and apologies to other people here if you don't have the same knowledge and interest in this issue as you do at the back, but Scottish Water, which provides water for domestic customers, is entirely in the public sector, and you know, I'm very proud of that in Scotland because we've proven that operating a water company in the public sector can deliver real benefits to customers. We've got some of the lowest water charges anywhere in the UK. Your point about non-domestic customers, Scotland's had an open market for that way before England did. So I think, from memory, I think it was 2005 that the market for non-domestic was opened up. Now, anybody here who runs a business or who's got responsibility for a business will know what I'm talking about. You can get your water services provided by Business Stream, which is the business arm of Scottish Water, or you can get them from a range of other private companies. So England's actually doing this several years after Scotland did it, and when I say 2005, it should give you a hint, it wasn't this government that did that, it was the previous government. And I don't want to get into all the technical detail here, but what you're referring to is us making sure, because what we have right now is water companies from south of the border can compete in Scotland's market, therefore it's right that Business Stream and companies here can compete in the market south of the border. So there's no change whatsoever to the ownership structure of Business Stream or to Scottish Water. These are public sector entities delivering not just quality services for the public, but actually delivering resources for the wider public as well. And water's one of the things Scotland's got a lot to be proud of. We've got a great expertise in water that we're now using to help countries in the developing world develop their own water resources. So I'm happy to have a chat with you afterwards or send you some more detail, but there is absolutely no change to the ownership structure. I'm going to answer the other questions just now. No, that's not correct. There's no change to the ownership structure of Scottish Water or Business Stream. Well, I don't know whether you think it would be fair to have English water companies coming up here and competing with Business Stream for business in Scotland, but Business Stream wasn't allowed to compete with companies in England for business in England. That wouldn't seem to me to be very fair. So there is, the ability for them to do that. But unlike the situation elsewhere, our water is in public hands, and that's the way it's going to stay. In terms of oil, the money we get from oil comes from the revenues, the taxation that oil companies pay. I want to see us be able to access that, to decide how that resource is spent in Scotland for the betterment of people in Scotland, rather than having it squandered on things that we don't need. I desperately want to see us have the ability over the next 10, 20, 30, 40, however many years of oil that is left, to do what Norway and other countries have done, which is to try to save some of that revenue so that we've got something to show generations to come long after oil has run out. The UK is the only country, well, that's not true, the UK and Iraq are the only two oil-producing countries in the world that haven't set up some kind of sovereign oil fund to show some benefit of oil from oil in the years to come. Point about child tax credits and tax credits generally, you would continue to get those in an independent Scotland. They would be paid by a Scottish government, not by the Westminster government. Whether it's tax credits, other benefits, pensions, the obligation to pay those would transfer from Westminster to the Scottish government. And as I said earlier on, the money to pay for those comes out of our pockets anyway. Longer term, as you might have heard, we want to work towards a system of universal provided childcare, so that children aged 1 to 5 get the same number of hours in childcare that children in primary school do, so that women in particular, parents generally, but women in particular, are able to go back to work and contribute to the economy. And that's the long-term plan that we have to make childcare much more freely available. But your tax credits, in terms of that's what you get just now to contribute to the cost of childcare, that will continue once we're independent.
We'll take the next 3 questions. We've got the guy at the back in the red and white striped shirt. Lady down here, and young guy. Okay?
As somebody who's undecided, I'm a half-pound yes, my head says no, no, no. I got a few questions that I need clarity about. As a career soldier, who's going to guarantee my terms and conditions of my pension going forward? Will it be the rump of the UK, or will it be Scotland? It's an independent nation. Secondly, if I was a soldier now, and I was told I was part of the inheritance, and being part of their fair share, I think I'd have issued with that, and I think there's a lot of soldiers going AWOL and rejoining the rest of the UK Army. And my third question would be around about Faslane and the global strategic positioning within America and the rest of the nuclear states, and how they feel towards getting that up. An example of which is the sovereign base nations in Cyprus and Gibraltar, and whether that would be part of the negotiations in terms of the pound.
Hello, my name's Nicola. You hear a lot of talk about Scotland having to negotiate in Europe. Now, as far as I can see, it's the United Kingdom that's in Europe just now, so why does England not have to negotiate?
I am Liam. I would like to ask, in an independent Scotland, would we keep NHS or would we receive some new healthcare system?
Right, okay, the questions from, are you still in the forces, or are you've just recently left? We've given a very straight commitment to people living in Scotland that their pension entitlement, whatever that pension entitlement is derived from, will be honoured by the Scottish Government. There will be a negotiation with Westminster about the apportioning of the costs for that, a kind of behind the scenes negotiation about what the share of funding of that is. But we thought it was important, I think it's important, to give a very clear commitment to people who are relying on or expecting to rely on pensions, that their entitlement will be honoured by an independent Scottish Government. In terms of your point about apologies for the terminology I'm going to use, divvying up of the armed forces. This is an important point because no serving member of the armed forces in the British Armed Forces could or should be forced, if they're Scottish, to leave the British Armed Forces and join the Scottish Armed Forces. I hope a lot would choose and opt to do that, because I hope we could offer terms and conditions and career prospects that would be attractive to people in the military. But there is nobody that is going to force any soldier or any member of any of the armed forces to leave and to join Scottish forces unless they want to. And you know, as somebody who's just left the military, the British armed forces have people serving in them from many countries across the world, so there's going to be no compulsion whatsoever. In terms of your question about Faslane, we see Faslane as having a continuing strategic role in Scotland. I explained this in response to a question earlier, not as a nuclear base but as a conventional base, and as the headquarters of our joint headquarters of our three armed forces. I think you were touching on how will our allies and partners see our desire to be rid of nuclear weapons. Well, you know, if you look at NATO, for example, an organisation that we want to continue to be members of, I think it's important strategically. We're a key part of the North Atlantic. I think it makes sense for us to be in the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation. The vast majority of countries, I think 25 out of the 28 members of NATO right now, are non-nuclear countries. And we would want to be members of NATO as another non-nuclear country, but playing our full part and contributing where we've got important capability, niche capability, contributing to the overall activities of NATO. And you know, we're not going to, it's not in our plans, nor it is in our interest to undermine you talked about sovereign bases, to undermine the British forces and the way that the British Army operates in cooperation with its allies. We would want to bring a positive contribution to that as a newly independent state, and our biggest ally, biggest friend, biggest partner is always going to be the rest of the UK. You know, we share an island, we are close neighbours. You know, our first ally and the people we will work closest with are the other parts of the UK. So hopefully that answers some of you. If you've got more questions afterwards, I'd be happy to see if I can help you with them as well. Question about the European Union. It's a good question, actually. Where's the lady who asked me that? It's a very good question. You know, there's certainly a strand of thinking in international law that says when two countries become independent, they're both in the same position and would have to join international organisations. Again, there's equally a strand in international law that says that's not the case, that in this case the rest of the UK would be the successor state and Scotland would be a newly independent country. In reality, these things will not come down to questions of law, they'll come down to questions of negotiation. So Scotland will make a transition from being a member of the European Union, as we are just now, as part of the UK, to being an independent member of the European Union. We will do that in the 18-month period between a yes vote, if there is a yes vote, and Scotland becoming independent in March 2016. We set out the treaty provisions in the European treaties that we think would enable that to happen. Interestingly, there's no provision in the European treaties that would allow Scotland or any other country to be put outside of Europe just because we voted to be independent. And for those who say, well, you wouldn't get into Europe, well, we're in already, we've been in for 40 years. We're Europe's biggest oil producing country. We get the biggest share of Europe's fishing waters. Scotland right now is home to 160,000 nationals of other European member states. Their right to be here depends on our membership of the European Union. So the idea that this European Union that has existed to expand itself from the moment it was set up is going to turn around to Scotland and say, no, we want to put you outside just because you happen to have voted for independence, I don't think passes the first test of credibility. We'll be in Europe, and we'll be in Europe as an independent member state, which means we can argue our own corner in Europe. We'll have a seat at the top table and our own voice, and we don't have that right now. My colleague, the Agriculture and Fishing Minister, Richard Lockhead, he goes to Brussels a lot to take part in meetings that are really important to our fishing industry, our farming industry. Do you know he's not allowed to speak at those meetings unless a UK minister gives him permission? Now that's no way to represent the interests of a country. So if we're independent in Europe, we'll be able to fight for our own interests and stand up for ourselves, and that's a far better way to be represented than the way we are just now. And last question here on, where's the guy who has my name? The NHS is the responsibility of the Scottish Parliament already. I've said earlier on, I used to be the Minister in charge of the health service, so all of the policies that decide what kind of health service we have are taken in the Scottish Parliament anyway. That's why we've been able to say we're not privatising the health service the way the health service has been privatised in England, and I certainly, as long as I've got anything to do with it, will never privatise the health service or go anywhere near it. The risk to our health service just now, though, comes from what is happening in the health service in England because of the way Scotland is funded right now. You heard of the Barnett formula. The Barnett formula is what determines how much money the Scottish Government gets. Now, what that means, the formula works so that in England, if health spending goes up by £100 million, we get 10% of that increase, so we'll get an extra £10 million, roughly. If health spending is cut in England by £100 million, we'll take a cut of £10 million. Now, what's happening in England right now is that the health service is being privatised. And the health service has been privatised because Westminster governments, certainly the one that's in just now, although this process was started with the last Labour government, over time, the privatisation of the health service will see more of the funding for the health service coming from private companies and less of it coming from the government. So we'll see over the next few years public funding of the health service in England reducing. And through the Barnett formula, that means we'll see cuts in our budget as well. And that's dangerous for our health service, and it's dangerous for our other public services, which takes me back to my central point. We need to control our own resources so that we can decide how we spend our resources, what they're spent on, and how we protect things like the National Health Service.
The lady at the back, standing next to Marie, lady here at the front, and the gentleman here at the front. We'll have one more round after this.
At least.
Okay?
Hi Nicola, is that up here?
Oh yeah, sorry.
I'm a youth voter, but as a mother of two young boys, what my concerns is, if we don't get independence, David Cameron has got plans from the west of Scotland right up to the Highlands and Islands in the east to go ahead for shale gas fracking. Where do we stand in independence for that? Hi, Samantha. It's a bit of a two-tier question to do with passports and travel. Obviously, if we get independence, we're no longer going to be British, UK passports, we're going to have Scottish passports. Who bears the cost of that? Plus, we currently are afforded a certain level of protection in foreign countries with the UK embassies. Is Scotland going to be opening embassies in all these countries? And how are they going to get the money to do that?
And the gentleman in front here.
Hi Nicola. When Scotland lost its independence at the Act of the Unions, the Scottish people never got a vote. There wasn't a referendum there. We didn't want the Act of the Union. The English didn't want it, but it was signed by one person because she didn't have an heir. So this is our chance to bring Scotland back to its right.
First of all, I think it's fair to say the Scottish Government is more sceptical about fracking than the UK Government is. We've just had an expert group look at both the potential, the energy potential of fracking, but also some of the environmental concerns that are associated with fracking, the impact it would have on our environment overall, and we've done some more work around some of the detail of that. There was a lot of talk a couple of weeks ago about the UK government issuing licences to companies to frack. One thing to remember is that even if a company has a licence to frack, in order to take forward a specific proposal to frack, they also have to have planning permission. And the planning process is devolved to the Scottish Government, so although it's a process that's governed by statute, having a licence to frack is not an automatic right to frack. There are other safeguards built in. So in short, I'm not saying we completely turn our face against that and ignore all of the potential, but we've got, I think it's fair to say, some healthy scepticism, and I think people have got very legitimate questions and concerns about the environmental impact of fracking that really do need to be looked at before we just steam ahead the way the UK government seem intent on doing. Question about passports and embassies. Let me take passports first of all. If we become independent, we'll have our own passport agency, and you will be able to have a Scottish passport, and most people would expect that that would be the case. If you, at the point of independence though, have a British passport that's got, 3 or 4 years left to run, that will be honoured until the point that it expires, and then when you come to renew your passport, you'll have the option of applying for a Scottish passport. Of course, the British government allows dual citizenship with other countries, and wouldn't be a decision for the Scottish government, it would be a decision for Westminster government, but I can't imagine they would have an objection if somebody in Scotland wanted to have a British passport, but you would have an entitlement to a Scottish passport. How we pay for that overall? We currently pay our share of the administration of the passport system in the UK. So we pay our full share of the cost of that. And instead of doing that in future, we would use that money, which comes out of our taxes, to pay for the system of issuing passports in Scotland. An independent Scotland would have embassies. Although Scotland's not yet independent, we've got about 25, I think it is at the last count. It's what are called Scottish Development International offices in key countries that are important for us economically around the world. So that would be the kind of starting point for our embassy network. We would have in the region of 70 to 90 embassies across the world, which is a similar number to countries of a similar size to Scotland. We would focus them very much on countries where we've got big economic potential and trading links. We're also very mindful of the kind of countries our citizens travel to most often, so there's a need to have embassies there for consular support. Members of the European Union, though, as a member of the European Union, citizen of the European Union, you can go to any other European embassy in any other country and seek consular assistance if your own country doesn't have an embassy, so that kind of protection still exists, but Scotland would have that kind of embassy network to make sure our interests were promoted around the world. Countries increasingly share embassy facilities. The UK not that long ago signed an agreement with Canada to share some embassy facilities because countries are looking at how to cut costs and do these things more efficiently. I'm pretty sure we would share some of these facilities with the rest of the UK, but we have our own dedicated embassy network to promote our interests across the world. So your point about the Active Union, you're right. This is the first time ever in history we've had the chance to vote on whether we want to be independent or not, and that's what makes it a very precious opportunity. My view, though, and it's a personal view, everybody will vote for their own reasons in 5 weeks' time. My personal view is we shouldn't vote for reasons of history or historical grievance or historical wrongs that we think should be righted, however important that might be. I think we should vote for the future. I think we should vote for the future and what is best for the kids. That's what I'll be voting for a better country for people who are alive today, but a better country for kids, including my niece and nephew, to inherit in the future, because they're as capable as anybody else of building a country to be proud of.
try and get people that have had their hands up for some time.
You can maybe take 4 for me.
Okay, I'll take 4. The guy at the back, but I can see a white sleeve up. Right, okay. Lady at the front here. Got the first one?
Hello again, Nicola. One of the reasons Norway is such a successful country and has no national debt is because it charges 78% corporation tax on its most profitable companies. Now, if you're not prepared to raise corporation tax, you're not prepared to take the power companies and the banks and the other profitable utilities under public ownership and use that profit money for the benefit of the community. How are you going to pay for the extensive social, health, educational and welfare programmes that were being promised? And I'm speaking as a yes voter, but I genuinely want to see more than a change of flag at St Andrew's House.
Hi there, my name's Michelle. I want to ask what independent Scotland's view would be on the bedroom tax and housing. I'm from Irvine and I stay with my partner and my daughter in Glasgow now. We're unable to be in a position to buy and we don't seem to be coming anywhere for social housing. Frustratingly, we see new houses getting put up everywhere. I've got nothing against asylum seekers or anybody moving to this country, but as someone who's worked since I was a teenager, my partner works hard as well. It's very frustrating to see people that don't even speak English or work being given brand new houses and we're struggling. All we want is a nice house, a nice garden.
Hiya, what's going to happen with the bedroom tax if we go independent?
Next one, anyone else? Over there. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ronnie. I'm just interested, you said about Scotland, the biggest part of our GDP, not based in oil. But can you answer me why it's not been made more public, as is rumoured that we have just discovered one of the largest oil fields ever off the coast of Shetland, and nothing's been said about it?
Very last question now, and the guy in the second front row.
Hi there. Sorry, can you hear? Hi there, my name's Scott Davidson, thanks. It's a couple of questions, but I'm going to try and make it sound like one. My colleague for the Army started it. First of all, finances. It was good to hear, I read the article rather, where Alex Alms now said, we're taking the pound, that's it. It doesn't matter if it's with Westminster or without them. What I want to know is, will the Bank of England, will they still be setting things such as our mortgage rates? In the terms, will they be able to shaft us with things like that? Or are we able to, set our own? I'm not sure how that works. That's one question. The pensions. This isn't all about me, but it affects my family and many, many people like me. I pay almost 15% of my wages to my pension, which is now becoming unaffordable. I've now got to work until I'm 60. I paid extra to retire at 55 because in my job, knees in particular, have got a shelf life. Now, we're having to work longer, just like we're lady behind us here. It's emergency services I work for. In independence, I know it's going to be hard to go back the way, but I also know that the SNP had deals where they had said that they were going to try and safeguard the likes of the firefighters and the police pension, other public sectors, I believe, but Westminster said, well, let's see how you can do that without, I believe it was about £400 million a budget that obviously you can't do without. in independence, are my pension safe? I only want what I signed up for and pay up to 7 times more for, so I can retire that wee bit earlier. I think it's got to the stage where the Yes campaign's too nice. Watched Alec versus Alistair, who is no Darwin, the other night there. All I've seen was him talking over Alec endlessly. Seen personal insults for the No campaign. I've had endless arguments about it on Facebook and face-to-face as well, which I prefer, where you say anything at all to anybody for the No campaign, you're shot down in flames, you're preached that. Speaking to the people to do with No is not like this here tonight, and I've got to commend you on that 100%. Is it time to start not being so nice? For instance, Alistair Darwin specifically did not answer 3 questions in that debate. All we're hearing about is, what is our plan B? Why are we not plastering it everywhere? Alistair Darwin can't say yes or no unless it's not to us. And I've got another question, but we'll stop
Okay, that's quite a long list, just for you. Right, let me go back to the top of the list. The first question from the gentleman at the back there was about corporation tax, how we're going to pay for the things that we want to see in Scotland. Before I answer that question, with reference to SNP policy, let me make just a point that is not made enough in this debate. It should be made more, and I haven't made it yet tonight, so I'll take that on board. But if we're independent, then we'll have elections, and different parties will stand for election, and it'll be up to you who gets elected. So that might be the SNP, but it might not be the SNP. So you're not voting for SNP policy in September, you're voting about whether or not the powers of independence should come from Westminster to Scotland. So if you don't like SNP policy on corporation tax or anything else for that matter, that's not a reason not to vote yes. It might be a reason not to vote SNP come the election in 2016, but it's not a reason not to vote yes. You can vote for another party that has policies on corporation tax or whatever else that you do like, that you like better than the SNP. But on corporation tax, we advocate competitive business taxes for a very simple reason. We think that will encourage more businesses to set up in Scotland, to create more jobs, to get more people into employment. And we do that because we recognise if you want to have the money to spend on better public services, you have to earn it before you can spend it. And how is that earned? It's earned from people who are in jobs, who are paying taxes, who are working hard and who are contributing to the economy. We often talk about, the way to get more money for governments to spend is to increase the tax rates that people pay. That's not the only way to get more tax money. Actually, a much better way to get more tax money is to have more people in jobs paying the same rates of tax. You get more money that way. So that's why we advocate competitive business rates. But the second way in which we pay for the things we want is to stop spending money on the things we don't want. I'm just going to give you 2 examples, which I think I mentioned earlier on, of things that we could stop spending money on. Nuclear weapons and the House of Lords. Those 2 things alone would save £600 million every year. Now that £600 million would be far better spent on some of the things that I've been talking about. So it's about your choices, your priorities, but you only get to make those choices and set those priorities if you've got control over your resources in the first place. A couple of questions on housing. If only I had the housing minister sitting next to me to help me answer these questions. Both of you asked about the bedroom tax. The bedroom tax, if I've got anything to do with it, if Margaret's got anything to do with it, will be abolished immediately we become independent. It's the most immoral and scandalous piece of legislation passed in Scotland since the poll tax, frankly. Your point about how we provide more social housing, though, is a fundamentally important point. We're trying to do that, and I know there's a lot of people on lists for social housing, so it seems as if we're not doing it fast enough, but we're doing it as fast as we can. We started council house building again, which had pretty much disappeared under previous government, so councils now build houses again. We've abolished the right to buy, not because we're against home ownership, but if you're building houses for social rent, it makes no sense to allow them to be sold off, so that people in new generations don't get we've been doing that over the past. It comes back to my point about controlling your own resources. We've been doing all of this over the past 5 years or so, while our capital budgets, the amount of money we get to spend on things that are bricks and mortar, it's been getting cut by about a third. Our capital budget's been cut by Westminster. So we need to control our own resources to determine how much money we're able to spend on things like that, but we'll keep doing as much as we can. We've also got a range of schemes to try and help people into home ownership, but there's no doubt that one of the most important things we've got to do as a country is build more houses for the people like you who need them. Shetland oil, there is exploration going on. I think you talked about the Clare Ridge field. I've got no evidence that there is anything being found there that's been hushed up. If anybody's got any evidence of that, I'd be very interested. I've read a lot of speculation like you will have, but I've got no hard evidence of that.
Sorry to cut in, Nicola, but I think everybody watched the debate last week with Ali was expecting him to throw that in his face.
Well,
it never happened. And I think a lot of people are disappointed.
Okay, but trust me, as somebody who's debated once or twice before, you've got to be sure of your ground before you start chucking things into a debate, or you find it comes back at you quicker than. I'm not prepared to believe that UK governments will, downplay the value of our oil. Yeah, I am, because they've done it for the last 40 years. But without evidence, I'm not going to start chucking around things, but if you've got evidence, or if any comes to light, then we'll be the first to say that Scotland's oil resources and reserves, wherever they are, wherever they're discovered, should be properly stewarded. The internet doesn't always get things right, just so you know. And lastly, on answer question from the Bank of England, if we're in a formal currency union, the Bank of England will set interest rates independently of government as it does right now. Now, being in a currency union means that there are compromises we have to make because we think it's for the greater good, and the judgment we've made is that a currency union is for the greater good. The point about pensions is a really important one because are you a firefighter or a firefighter? You'll know then, we were very against, as the Scottish Government, the they imposed increases in contributions, the increases in pensionable age that were imposed on our public service workers, firefighters, the health service, but we were unable to stop that because Westminster was going to claw back significant sums of money from us if we did that. What we've said is if we get control of these pension schemes, if we are the ones in charge, we won't operate in that way, because you pay into your pension scheme, you've got an entitlement to know what it is you're going to get out, and I want us to be in control of the pensions policy so that people are not being forced to work for longer and longer and longer, paying in the same and getting, in fact, paying in more and ending up getting less out of these schemes. But we need to be in control of these decisions if we're going to do it differently in future, which brings me back to the central point here. If we want to be the ones in control of this country's future, we've got to take control of it. I said earlier on, it doesn't mean everything will always be perfect, and it doesn't mean we'll always get things right, and it doesn't mean we won't have tough times. All countries have tough times, but it means we will be the ones making the decisions about how our money is spent, about the opportunities we want for our young people, about the tax rates we think is right for people to pay, and we're always going to be better able to make the right decisions than Tory politicians in Westminster will ever be able to do. So, 5 weeks on Thursday is polling day. If you've got a postal vote, you'll get it probably 2 weeks tomorrow. That's how close this is now. And as I said earlier on, we might not get this chance